Deep in the rugged mountains of Appalachia, where the forest cloaks itself in whispering pines and ancient moss hangs like ghostly drapes, there stood an old cabin abandoned long before any living soul dared claim it. The locals in the nearby hollow spoke of it with uneasy voices, strange lights at dusk, the sound of wind voices in the trees, and the sudden disappearance of wandering hikers. They called the woman who lived there the Witch in the Woods. Her name was Maribeth Cornwell, though few knew it. She preferred to be simply the witch, for that she had become, both by reputation and by the gritty truth of her craft. Decades ago, she had come to this wild place, heart-heavy with loss and bitterness, and settled among the hemlocks and rhododendron, turning to old lore and healing herbs and darker things too. The forest embraced her, and in return she listened to its secrets. One autumn evening, a young botanist named Lila Harper ventured into the woods, intent on collecting specimens of rare moss for her thesis. She found the cabin by accident, or perhaps by design. Mist curled around the trees, and the path seemed to lead, half-hidden, until her boot crunched leaves at the threshold. Maribeth welcomed her with a wary kindness, hot tea in an iron pot, the smell of wood smoke and dried herbs, a fire flickering in the hearth. Somehow Lila felt safe, though the shadows of the forest pressed at the windows. Over several days, Lila worked, gathering moss, pressing leaves, sketching tiny fern fronds. Maribeth helped, showing hidden groves where the air tasted like rain, where mushrooms glowed faintly at night. They talked late into the evenings, Maribeth about the forest's old bones, its memories, Lila about the world beyond the mountains, about laboratories and city lights and sterile research. They were different in every way, yet both drawn by the wild. Then one morning Lila woke to find Maribeth gone. In the cabin sat a small, carved wooden box, lid slightly open. Inside lay a single sprig of the moss Lila had sought and a folded note. The woods remember. The woods demand. Troubled, Lila slipped outside. The forest lay still and heavy. The path she used to come in was gone, swallowed by new shoots and creeping vines. Panic rose in her chest. She called Maribeth's name, but only wind answered. Night fell, and Lila realized she could not go back the way she came. The forest seemed different, older, watching. She felt the presence of something watching her from the trunks and shadows. She came upon a clearing where dozens of mushrooms formed a faint circle in the moonlight. A low chant hummed through the trees, as though the forest itself was speaking. From the edge of the clearing, Maribeth stepped forward, her face pale in the moon's glow, her eyes brighter than fire. "You must choose," Maribeth said softly. "You have taken from the forest. Now the forest asks, will you give back?" Lila's heart pounded. She had never believed in curses or witches, yet here she stood, under the canopy of silent giants, confronted by one such. "What do you mean?" she asked. Maribeth raised the wooden box. Inside lay a handful of soil, dark, rich, alive. "This soil is old. The moss you took is its child. You cannot simply remove it without consequence." The forest sighed. The wind turned. The circle of mushrooms pulsed faintly. "If you leave with your specimens, you will carry the forest's debt. But if you stay, if you plant what you took, if you learn the forest's rhythms, you may walk out free of its claim." Lila glanced at her bag, filled with pressed moss and sketches. She thought of her thesis, the recognition she sought, the research, the accolades. But the forest pressed in, whispering. She lowered her head. "I'll stay," she said. "I will learn." Maribeth nodded. The moon slid behind a cloud. The clearing faded. When Lila blinked, she found herself back at the cabin threshold, the bag at her feet. Maribeth was seated by the hearth, tea steaming. "Then we begin at dawn," she said. "Tomorrow you plant. Tomorrow you listen." And so Lila did. Each day she turned soil, planted fragments of moss among the old roots, learnt which ferns thrived in shadow and which demanded a shaft of light. She listened to the wind in autumn leaves, the rush of a hidden stream, the groan of a pine as it shed its needles. She learned the forest's slow language. Maribeth guided her, but the forest taught her. Weeks passed. The bag of specimens remained untouched. Lila hardly thought of her thesis or her city life anymore. She moved with the forest's pulse, felt its sorrow and its fierce joy. One evening, she asked Maribeth, "Will I ever leave?" Maribeth regarded her quietly. Yes, she said. When you're no longer the taker, but the giver. The forest is owed. When you can give instead of take, you will walk free. Winter came early. Snow lay heavy on the hemlocks. Lila's boots cracked across the frozen ground. One morning she awoke to a knock at the door. It was the voice of a ranger from the Park Service. The trail cleared, the path reopened. You may leave when you wish, Maribeth said. The forest will forgive you now. Lila stepped outside. The cabin door closed behind her softly. She walked the trail, lighter somehow, the burden lifted. Her bag empty, her mind full. She looked back once, saw the cabin, dark and still, a lone window glowing faintly. Maribeth stood in the doorway, a silhouette amid the trees. When Lila reached the road, the car waiting, the noise, the world beyond the forest, she hesitated. Then she whispered, "Thank you." The forest answered with a gentle rustle. Years later, Lila's thesis was published, but it was different than she had planned. It didn't boast about collecting rare moss. It told of listening, of respect, of the forest as a living being. And every spring, she returned to the woods. In the distance, she would sometimes glimpse a figure at the cabin door, and she would wave. The witch in the woods would nod, and the forest would breathe and reply.